Hi friends! In a previous video, I explained how Ayn Rand indoctrinated her followers and was caught up in a really ugly love triangle that led to the downfall of her following. I had a similar experience to Ayn Rand's followers, and in this video, I explain the differences between my experience and the experience of Rand's followers, how I was not indoctrinated and why, and how understanding indoctrination can help you to navigate a crazy information age. If you want to know more about the truth and how it can set you free, click the link below. Thanks for watching.
I want to clarify some terms and give you some tools that will help you to see indoctrination for what it is and help you to move out those muddy clouds that lead to indoctrination. I'm going to give you some definitions really quickly, just so we're on the same page. Doctrine is whatever is laid down as true by an instructor or master. So Ayn had doctrines. Doctrine is just whatever is taught as being true in its very basic form. Now, a disciple is one who receives instruction from another as followers and adherent to the doctrines of another. So, if I'm someone's disciple, as Nathaniel and Barbara were Ayn's disciples, then Ayn is my teacher and she tells me the doctrine and I follow that. Indoctrination is the process of molding the thoughts and actions of individuals to conform with the beliefs and values of the teacher. There are lots of things about our human nature that lend themselves to being indoctrinated. You know, we need to feel included. We kind of tend to be lazy. We have a lack of education. There's a lot of peer pressure. Things that really are kind of the nature of indoctrination become normalized, and so it just seems like it's just everybody's doing it, it's just normal. We also have a tendency to deceive ourselves with our wrong intentions, with our wrong beliefs, with our doubts and fears. We brought that up earlier. And a big one that's happening today, of course, that we just pound this all the time, and that is the loss of truth, the loss of principles. You know, C.S. Lewis gave his talks on mere Christianity in the 40s. And the first one he gave was on natural law because he didn't think in 1940s that people had enough understanding of the Bible and of natural law to even understand Christianity clearly. If they didn't know it then, we're in a lot of trouble today. And what's happening too, and I know you all see this, is that evil is becoming talked of as good and good as evil. Now, the first thing I want to point out, it's obvious, but maybe not so obvious, is conscience. It's right there talking to you, telling you what's right and wrong, but conscience can be deadened, and conscience can be heightened. And those things happen in accordance with our diligence to hone our conscience and to obey it. How can a person get to the point where they murder or they do, it's not, they don't walk, it doesn't happen in a day. There's a lot of deadening of conscience that goes on before you get to that point. Jordan Peterson said something that's really profound. I think is profound. He was talking about how, especially in his 20s, he wanted to understand how the things that happened in the 20th century could possibly have happened. I mean, it just was crazy to him. He's becoming aware, he's getting this education, he's like, how could we do this? How could the world participate in the things that happened in the 20th century? So he's studying and thinking and discerning and trying to get his mind around it. And he comes to this profound conclusion: that the only way that those things could be stopped is if the individual people that participated were not willing to participate. And the only way that the individual people would be not willing to participate is because they had become the kind of people who wouldn't participate, who had so honed their consciences, who had such a bright, clear understanding of truth that it would be clear to them. And this was really what lit me on fire the first time I read The Hiding Place. How can this man in Holland, in the midst of all his neighbors, how can the pastor come over and be unwilling to take the baby? He's the pastor, for heaven's sake. But Father's ready to give his life because he had become the kind of person that would not execute those kinds of things. And that is something we can do something about right now that will make a huge difference. I can't tell you how many great people I've studied who have said specifically that they committed themselves to living their lives according to conscience. And it made them who they became. Now, I actually had an experience kind of similar to Nathaniel and Barbara's. I was young. I had some doctrines that I believed, but I wanted to understand them better. I was impressionable. I wanted to study great things. I wanted to know things. I wanted to hone my reason. I wanted to think deeply. I wanted to understand. The world was confusing to me. I didn't understand the nature of truth. I wasn't good at discerning. And I found a college. And it was, changed my life. They introduced me to incredible things. They taught me stuff I'd never heard of. They turned my mind on. And I saw around me people making unbelievable sacrifices, just like they made for Ein. People uprooting their families and moving across the country to be part of this movement, calling it mission, giving everything for the cause. I also saw it disseminate and fall apart. I also saw that people were confused and disillusioned by what happened when everything didn't work out. But I was the very opposite of indoctrinated. And I'll tell you why. There's a few key fundamental things that were a part of my experience and a part of Nathaniel and Barbara's experience. The first one is choosing the right leaders. Mortimer Adler said, "A man has as much authority intrinsically as he is able to speak the truth." He said, "A good teacher is usually one who is himself an active student of the subject matter in which he gives instruction, for he is both a teacher of those who know less than himself and a student of the masters of his subject matter." It really matters who we follow, who we listen to. Check in on their character. Find out what their goals are. Make sure that they are speakers of truth. Listen, some of the things that were different between those that I followed and Ein is that those I followed had a leader and an authority higher than themselves. Ein did not. Those that I followed encouraged my independent thinking, disagreement, and debate. In fact, one of Ein's followers later said, I am greatly indebted to her for how she taught me to reason and think, but when I realized that I couldn't disagree with her, that's when I had to leave. That was a person with better discernment skills who would not be indoctrinated. My leaders abstained from trying to guide every aspect of my life, like tell me who to marry, for example, or what to think, what to believe. There was a lot of freedom around, you figure it out, you compare it to your beliefs, and a lot of debate and discussion. I was encouraged to lead myself, to be independent, to find truths and live them for myself. And the leaders that I followed abstained from judgment of their followers. They let them live their lives. They brought forth truth, they spoke it as they knew it, and they encouraged us to discern for ourselves. A second huge difference was my role as a disciple or a student or a follower. Mortimer Adler teaches a concept called docility, which is basically the right way when you have found a teacher that you know you need to learn from. And, Mortimer Adler was awesome. He's like, we all know that our thinking isn't clear all the time. We need direction. We need mentoring. We have to be careful who we follow and what we follow from them. So docility is the virtue which regulates a man's will with respect to learning from a teacher. He says, as we owe piety to God as the source of our being and to our parents as the source of our becoming, so docility is a kind of piety towards teachers as among the sources of our learning that requires our gratitude and our humility. So he says, the two extremes are Go ahead. It's docility, docile or docility. So the two extremes are indocility and subservience. So what did Ayn Rand do? She encouraged subservience with her followers and indocility with everyone else. When you're docile, you're humble, you're teachable, you're willing to engage with your mentor in a pursuit of the truth. And if you don't understand something that they've told you, you're patient, you discern, you wait, you slow down the process, and you let them guide you because they have led you to light in the past, and you hope that they'll lead you to more light now. But always with your conscience very strong and with your reasoning skills on. Mortimer Adler talks about his experiences. He says, I know how often I have failed to abide by this precept, how often I have adopted, for example, statements by Aristotle or St. Thomas Aquinas because of emotional predispositions. On the other hand, so much of what David Hume says was repugnant to my reason fairly early in my study of philosophy that I tended to reject him entirely. We do this with the people that we read. We do this with the leaders that we follow. We want to be docile, teachable, humble, willing to submit and reason with them and let them shape us, but we only want that to happen if we know they're of a character that is worthy to follow and that they have spoken truth to us in the past, and so they may be able to lead us to greater truths. And we don't want to, indocility, of course, is to reject it out of hand, and subservience is just whatever Rand says, we better get married. Whatever Rand says, you better have an affair. That's subservience. Now, the third tool is to find and weigh all the applicable evidence. Here again, a huge difference in our experiences. I was given the whole feast. Please read from all the world religions. Please learn about worldviews. Please read the differences between Hayek and Keynes. And I was encouraged to debate, to think through, to look at all sides. And it's super, super critical that we do that. Now, I want to make one little comment here around us as moms. I have on occasion run into situations where, because you are so tender and soft and humble, difficult things, hard material, you can shy away from. That's one mistake we don't want to make. But things that are very painful to read, sometimes we just kind of reject out of hand, like, there's a lot of evil in that. That's really painful. I don't want to read it. We have to remember that of course we're not going to invite evil into our homes. Of course we're not going to read things that offend our spirit. But there are appropriate times and places to know. I don't want to know about transgenderism, but I have to. It's not a topic I'm fond of, like I'm not fond of abortion and I'm not fond of, other things that are happening in my world. But I have to know. Because my kids know. And because if I don't find out so that we can discuss it, they might go find it out from all the wrong sources. And that means I have to listen to painful things. And that means I have to find out stuff that isn't my favorite. Now, the fourth tool you're going to use is comparing it to principles. I'm not going to spend time here because that's all we're doing all the time. You've got the 12 characteristics of true principles on your bookmark. You've got the podcast that you listen to, all kinds of other things. But when you think that you have a teacher that has led you to some truth, compare it to those 12 characteristics, think it through, make sure you really believe it's a principle before you get involved. And then the fifth thing that we want to do is talk it through until we know we understand it. You can do this with journaling. You can do this with book discussions. You can do this with your spouse, your girlfriend. There's this little story that Mortimer Adler tells. They brought in these PhD students who were actually already leaders in the educational arena. And they were supposed to do this like week-long class, I guess, on education. And so they said, okay, so to begin this clinic, we're going to define education. And they said the definition of education is the process whereby the power of human nature become developed by good habits. This is like in the 40s. And all these teachers are like, hold up, good habits? I don't think so. That smacks of judgment and deciding which habits are good or not, and we're not going to go for that. So this is what he says about it. Some of them said there was nothing good or bad about education, and others shocked us even more by suggesting that education might as well be a development of bad habits. The argument went on for days, requiring us to get down to fundamentals. In the course of it, we discovered that these professionals in education had been thoroughly indoctrinated with scientism and positivism. The mark of indoctrination was that they really couldn't defend their position. Now, you and I are here to build doctrines, to clarify them and understand them so that we can build healthy lives on that foundation. And when you cannot explain clearly what your doctrine is, there's a problem. If you can't, first of all, because you're a mom, so you've got to be able to explain it clearly to yourself, to your children. And again, how can we be perpetuators of truth? How can we share the doctrines that we know unless we can explain them clearly? So we need to develop the skill and pay the price to be able to explain what we believe. And as we do so, it will become more and more clear to us. That's why we focus so heavily in the Academy on group discussion. Just please get on and get on and get on and talk it through so that you can get clear about what you know to be true. Now, the last thing that you want to do is look at the fruits. What are the fruits of the situation that you find yourself in? You've checked in with your conscience, you've reasoned things through, you've looked at all the evidence, you've thought about it, you've discussed it, you've got the right teachers and mentors. What are the fruits? Especially in that person's life or the fruits of the things that you're considering doing. I can say that in my experience, I'll never forget, I was reading this economics packet. Oh my heavens. It was the driest thing you might ever try to force yourself to read. And it was painful. I didn't want to do it. And I remember one day, I was like, why am I even doing this? Why am I putting myself through this torture of reading these economists? And it was almost as if this voice said, so that you can understand your doctrine. And what I found to be true is that the more I studied and learned about natural law and natural rights and all the richness there is in Scripture around these truths, the more I was a better mom. My doctrines came to life. I saw that how societies are built and how they work, and that my home is a little society, and that I needed to teach truth there, and that I needed to be a better judge, and that we needed to have principle-centered laws and rules. Scripture came to life for me, and I was a much better person, a much better mom. And so the fruits of my experiences in using these reasoning tools was light and truth and clarity in all kinds of new ways. Mortimer Adler said that the objective is to know the truth about God, man, and nature, and the end of human life, and that all our efforts in research and reason must be referred to which we refer is the knowledge of God. So my challenge to you is to think about who you are a disciple to, what is your doctrine, and how well can you perpetuate it? Thanks.